So last week I think we did classes and objects. Huge topic. So what I strongly recommend you doing is go ahead and read the book, Chapter 9, over classes. I've done a second lecture over the classes that I'm going to want y'all to watch for the section that meets twice a week. So I'll post a link to that. I don't want to rehash that one this time because I want us to dive into using the Tkinter Tkinter interface library. Now this is also a huge topic. We could easily spend like 4 weeks lecturing about user interfaces just because user interfaces are a very complex thing. But we can get a start. We can get a good little start on it. So the idea behind the user interface by the Tkinter library is that you create a window, call it a frame, and then you start attaching objects to it. You attach checkboxes or labels or text entry fields, things like that. And then once you attach buttons to it, you assign to the button a callback function so that when the button is clicked, then it calls your function. So let's just do like the simplest possible example of doing something like that. I'm just going to put a button on the screen, and I'm not going to do anything else other than print a message. So the library we use is Tkinter. From Tkinter import star. And just because it's really annoying and half the time people wind up having to add this anyways, that doesn't seem to be enough to get the message box function. So we're going to type in from Tkinter import message box, like that. Should not have to do it, might not have needed it, but I've ran into, how everybody's setup's just a little bit different, and sometimes it can't find the message box function in the library, and so we do that. We add that and it fixes it. Okay, so we're going to create a window. Window equals capital T, lowercase k, parentheses in parentheses. Let's run it. We are in lecture LM. All right, and it created a window. Say we don't like looking at that window. They should have just called it hide, but there's a withdraw command. Does the same thing as hide. tk.hide, parentheses in parentheses. No, I just said it was called withdraw because it is. tk.withdraw, parentheses in parentheses. Created it. It says missing one required positional argument self. That's probably very true. I'm going to get rid of that for now. Let's add a button to our little window. Here's what I did not do. We're going to add a frame to our window. I hate using things that differ only by case, so instead of the word frame, I'm just going to use FR, even though it's a little less distinctive. FR equals capital F, R-A-M-E, parentheses, window, in parentheses. We're attaching a frame to our window. And now we are going to pack. Calling pack tells it to organize everything inside the window. Right now we've only got the frame, but we're going to do it anyways. Frame.pack, parentheses in parentheses. Now when we run it, it's not going to have anything in it at all, hardly, because pack causes it to shrink down to the nearest point at all time. Okay, what did I do wrong? Excuse me. fr.pack. I should have just gone with my instincts and called it frame. All right, so there. Right, we don't have any data at all. right? It packed it to its smallest possible size. But once we start adding buttons and things like that, it'll be there. Let's add a button to it. Button 1 equals capital B button, B, U-T-T-O-N, parentheses. I'm really regretting not calling it frame. I'm sorry. Go back up here and modify frame, FR to say frame, and FR to say the frame there, because it makes what we're typing here look a lot cleaner. So we're creating a button, we're attaching it to that frame. Our text, TEXT equals, quote, wow, end quote, comma. And what command are we going to call? Command equals say underscore wow. Well, we haven't written that command yet, so that's not going to work. And then we need to pack that button. Button1.pack, parentheses, end parentheses. And now we're going to loop until the window is closed. So window dot main loop, open parentheses, close parentheses. Now I expect this to not even run because we don't even have say wow defined yet. So we're going to write a function that says wow when it's clicked, when the button is clicked. If we were smart, we'd be putting all this stuff inside, functions and using the if underscore main. But anyways, let's come up here, and here's what we're going to do. Define def say underscore wow, parentheses, in parentheses, colon, print wow, end quote, in parentheses. And so now we've written the user interface. Obviously a very simplistic one, but we can trigger an event. What's going on when we click that button? It comes up here, the code runs, it sets everything else, and when we call main loop, the program just sits there waiting for something to happen, and then when the user clicks the wow button, since the button was told to activate say underscore wow when it was clicked, it does so. Let's pop up a message rather than just print something to the screen. Windows are cooler. So I'm going to comment that out and do message box dot show info, show info, parentheses, quote, title, that's stupid, right? End quote, comma, wow, exclamation point, end quote, in parentheses. So just about every programming interface library has something called the message box. The message box is just a little thing that pops up on the screen that looks like that. You've seen that any number of times. Obviously, we could give it a better title than that. Maybe we ought to remove the title if we're not going to fill it in with anything, right? We could just say title is equal to that, right? But all right, there's other kinds. Not only is there show info, there's show warning, and then there's show error. So if we change show info to show error, then when we clicked wow, all right, looks a little bit more serious. All that did is change the icon. If we changed it to show warning, it'd show a yellow triangular caution sign. If you want something to kill your app, you call its destroy method. Let's add a second button and cause it to destroy the app. So down here where we have button 1 is equal to all that stuff, before our main loop call, because if we add it after main loop, it's never going to get there. Button 2 is equal to button, parentheses, frame, comma, text equals, quote, kill, end quote, comma, command equals kill. And we need to pack that one as well. Button2.pack, parentheses in parentheses. Now we don't have a function called kill, but we will very soon. So I'm going to come up here and add another one. def say, whoops, no, def kill, parentheses in parentheses, colon, print, killing the window. Actually, destroying the window would be a better term for it. So destroying the window. And then we're going to call window.destroy, parentheses in parentheses. And it killed it. And yes, we could have killed it anyways just by clicking the red X, right? But now we've seen that there is a way to kill the program besides waiting for the user to decide when to do it. All right, this almost all fits on one screen. Not really though. So at the very top we have the two import statements from Tkinter import star. And then here's the rest of the code for now. Let's pause, make sure people are doing okay. Alright, so we've done one user interface. I recommend that we actually save this. And, I mean, we could just keep tacking stuff onto the same file, I guess. Sure, why not? So I'm going to add a comment here that this was a user interface with two buttons. One that kills the app and one that says wow with message box. That's what that one was. Now we're going to do something very similar, except we're going to write it as a class, which is actually not a bad thing to do when you're doing user interfaces. Kind of binds all your knowledge together into the class so that we can track it more easily. So, same thing, but written as a class. So we're just going to call our class app with capital A. Class app colon. So we need an init function because all of our objects need init functions. def space underscore underscore init underscore underscore parentheses self comma. Now I used window in the other example. Window's a perfectly good term, but as you look through the documentation online, you're going to see them all starting to use the word root. So whenever you hear roots, think that's what our window was in the last example. I could just call it window to be consistent with the last example since I said the same thing. But after this, I'm probably going to be using the word root just because all the examples show that. And then button name. And so self dot, I'm going to go back to root. If I don't make it root now, then I'm going to wind up making typos and I'll have typos, and so I changed that to root rather than window. Self dot root is equal to the root that's passed in, the window pointer that's passed in. Self dot frame equals, excuse me, not frame one. Self dot frame lowercase f equals frame with a capital F. Parentheses root, In other words, we have to create a frame and attach it to our window, just like we did before. And now we're going to make a button. 2 buttons, since our other one had 2 buttons. We had a wow button, and then we had a kill button. So self.wow button equals capital B button, parentheses, self.frame, comma, text equals button name, button name, comma, and command equals display, whatever we want to display. And that's probably enough. No, because this needs to be a function that we're going to write, and so it's going to have self dot in front of it. We have not written our display function yet, so it will not compile at this point. Now let's create our kill button. Self.kill button equals button, very similar stuff, self.frame, comma, text equals kill, end quote, comma, command equals kill, self.kill. Notice that when we specify the function we're going to call, we don't put parentheses there. That's because we're just setting it up. We're saying we're going to be calling the display method if that button is ever clicked. But don't call it right now. If we put the parentheses there, it would call it as why we were declaring it, and we don't want that. Okay, so we need 2 functions. We need a self.display method and a self.kill method. They don't even have to do anything yet, but we got to put them in there so it'll compile. So I'm going to go back 1 tab, def display, parentheses, self, end parentheses, colon. Let's just make it print something. Wow. There we go. And now the second one to kill needs to kill ourselves. I guess we could have used quit for a less violent word. So display, but we're going to stick with kill. Def kill, parentheses, self in parentheses, colon, and we have to call our root self dot root dot destroy. All right, seeing all these references to killing is depressing me, so I'm going to do a Control H. Change the word kill to quit. Replace all. All right, let's see if it compiles. Wow, does display wow, but that's the first one. This is a problem with putting all the apps in one application, is that each time we add a new app to it, it's going to take longer to run. We have to close through all the old ones. Okay, so I haven't created the app, so we can't see it. But at least it compiled. So let's make a new window and pass it to our app. Window equals capital T, lowercase k, parentheses, in parentheses. An app equals, capital A, pp, parentheses, window, which fills in the root parameter, comma, and what's this button going to say? Why not? Wow 2, that's going to be the title of that button, in parentheses, end quote, and now we have to run the loop on it. So window.main loop. That's the first one. There's the second one, and I made a mistake. I forgot to pack my buttons onto the frame. So I'm going to have to go back to our init method and add several packs. We didn't pack the frame, and we didn't pack either button, so let's just do them all in order. Come back up here inside the init method and do self.frame parentheses pack in parentheses. Self.wowButton.pack. But let's send this button to the left. So lowercase SIDE equals all caps left, close parentheses. And we're going to set the quit button to the side, to the right side. So self.quit button, or kill button if you did not make that change when I did, quit button.pack side equals all caps right. Pack is not defined. I don't know what I typed there, but that was not correct. It's supposed to be self.frame.pack. I'm changing that line to actually be correct. Shouldn't be parentheses pack, it should be dot pack parentheses in parentheses. And there's our second one. We could try adding a little bit of padding. When we pack our frame, let's try setting some padding. Pad x equals 20, comma, pad y equals 20. I'm not sure if that one's going to do it. I know a different place to put it. This is an experiment. Yeah, see that? It set a padding for the frame of 20 pixels, so they're not crammed up all against the edge anymore. If we wanted to put padding so that our buttons had spaces between them, we could do that as well. Okay, so this is all well and good, but so far all we've had are buttons and message boxes and print statements. So I'll keep this on the screen for a moment longer. I'll scroll it down to show you how we called it. You know, we could create several different applications at the same time. Why don't we do that? We have app here. Let's make a second app. App2 equals capital A, PP, parentheses, window, comma, wow3, end quote, in parentheses. And now we're going to have to call the main loop for both of them. You know what, I don't think this is going to work the way that I want it to, but let's find out. Yeah, maybe it will. Let's find out. Yeah. Okay, that's not what I was expecting, and I'm not going to take the time to fix this. I'm just going to undo it. I think in my example I actually created separate arrays. Excuse me, separate windows. Right, create window 2 is equal to TK and then pass that in, but why don't we just not get fancy? We'll delete that. Alright, so that's working for everybody. Do I need to come and lay eyes and hands on the computer? We okay? Alright, so what about having some data that can change? Are we ready to create a new file so we don't have to keep clicking close, or do we just want to create the world's largest lecture file? Yeah, let's create a new one. So I'm going to do a new and call this M2, lecture M2. As an alternative to packing, you can use what's known as the grid manager. The way the grid manager works is you said, okay, on the first row of my interface, I want this piece. And then the second row of my interface, I want this piece. And on the first row in this column, I want this piece. And then this. So let's give that a shot. So again, we have to import asterisk from TKINTER. Import star from, wait, wrong syntax. From TKINTER import star. Let's create our window. Window is equal to TK, capital T, lowercase k, parentheses, in parentheses. And now we're going to create some labels that we're going to attach to it. A label is just showing something on the screen, but it's not a button. It's not exactly a data entry field either. You can't put your cursor on it and change it, but it displays something. So L1, the label 1, is equal to label. We want to attach it to the window, so parentheses, window, comma, text equals, quote, first name, end quote, comma. Close the parentheses there, and then do dot grid parentheses row equals 0. I think we could separate that into two separate statements. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to come back here and do L1 dot grid parentheses row equals 0 in parentheses. Now let's make a second one. We could just copy all this, paste it, and change first name to second name. L2 equals label, window, comma, text equals last name, end quote, close parentheses. L2 dot grid parentheses rows equal to 1. Let's call main loop and just see what we see so far. Window.mainLoop. Alright, so without calling pack, we see what it's doing. We have a first row, row 0, and we have a second row, a row 1. And we want to put two data entry blocks, entry objects, entry with a capital E. And so we're going to try to put them in the same row. We're going to have a first name entry box in row 0, but it's going to go in column 1. So it's going to be to the right of first name. Let's push down window main loop. E1, or could call it like first name or something like that. E1 for entry equals capital E entry window end parentheses. And in E2 we need a last name data entry place. E2 is equal to entry window and now we're going to create the button that when clicks tells us that we're trying to log in. Oops, we have not assigned these into our grid yet. So E1.grid row equals 0. What happens if we don't specify a column? This is just an experiment on my part. E2.grid row is equal to 1. Is it smart enough to know, to start filling things in without us specifying which column they're in? I can't say that I think it is. Okay, so here we go. Where it says row equals 0, comma, column equals 1. And then the next one's going to be row equals 1, comma, column equals 1. I typed 2, I meant to say 1. Now we should have our little user interface with no button that does anything. But right, there's a place where we could type something. Okay. We're going to need to know how to get that data out of there, and you do it with the .get method. We also probably want to know how to set data into those entry fields. And it's not as easy as it ought to be using the controls that we're using right now. So let's add a button that says login, something to that effect. B1 for login button equals capital B button, parentheses, window, comma, text equals quote, login, end quote, comma, command equals login, close parentheses, which of course means that we need to write that command. Guess I'll go up here and write it right up here. DEF login, parentheses in parentheses. Now since we're not writing a class, we don't need to make it self or anything like that. Let's get the first name and the last name out. Fn is equal to entry1.get, parentheses. That gets our first name out. Ln is equal to e2.get, parentheses in parentheses. And let's just print a message for now, since that's the easiest thing to do. Print Fn, comma, Ln, comma, quote, logging in, end quote, in parentheses. But I forgot to insert our object into the grid. I wonder what would happen if I just called pack. Why would I want to mix packing and grids? I don't know. This is a pure experiment. I'm not expecting it to actually work. But I am curious. Nope. Nope. All right. It says you cannot use the Geometry Manager pack when it already has slaves managed by grid. Alrighty. Anyways, didn't figure that would work. So we're going to add this to our grid, and we're going to make it row 2. So b1.grid row equals 2, but we want it to start in column 0 but span 2 columns. So row 2, column equals 0, and then the whole word, they didn't just make it col span for some reason, column span equals 2, because I want it to fill, you know, the entirety of the screen, entirety of the little dialogue. All right. What if you have a data entry field and you wish that you could change the data programmatically? Like what if the login button needed to clear out the last name or the first name, or we wanted to pre-fill these pieces of information with something, some default values? Let me try something that I thought worked, and then I saw it work one time and not work the other. Right here, before we actually start running things, before we do main loop, let's try to change the text of the entry field as though it were a dictionary. And I'm not convinced this is going to work, but E1 subscript quote text end quote in subscript equals Joe end quote. That'd be enough to prove it or not. And it didn't. Alright, so what we really got to do is we have to delete the contents of the entry field and then replace it with what we want. And so this is kind of silly, but let's put a comment to the effect of what we are doing here. Fill in the first entry field with a new value. So E1 dot delete parentheses 0 comma all caps E and D. Delete everything in the entry field from the beginning to the end, and then insert some new data. E1 dot insert Joe. There's a cleaner way of doing this. Or not. Oh, I forgot to specify where we're inserting. Insert 0 comma. So insert straight into the beginning of the control that word. Insert 0 comma Joe. And it did. It filled it in. It slightly irks me not to just have a set command. We have .get to get text out of the entry field, but we don't have .set. We could prove that to ourselves. E2.set, and this is not going to go away because it's not going to work. Joe Roberts. And nope, doesn't work. So that's strange to me. But the key, the fix for that is to create what's known as a string var. The whole word string followed by var. And you bind that string var to the control. And every time the string var content changes, it automatically updates the control because it's bound to it. Slightly odd, but we may as well go ahead and do that. What do we want? A middle name? Something else under the button that we just changed for no apparent reason? Yeah, let's. We need a password. We don't have a password field. So, let's do that. Let's make a password. And I guess we're going to put it underneath row 2, so it's going to look out of place, but that's okay. Let's make a new label, and its text is going to be password, and then we're going to make a new element, which is going to be the password, but it's going to be set to a string var. So string var, whoopsie, don't do Java. I want to make sure I get this exactly right. Okay. So, password equals string var with a capital S. This will contain the password. Now let's make a label. What were we calling our labels? L1 and L2. Okay, L3 equals label, parentheses window, that's the same window we're attaching it to, comma, and the text equals, quote, password. I may just be about to do something I'm going to regret. Let me make sure that I can do this. Attach string var to entry tkinter. Yeah. By using text variable. Okay. So we're going to create our entry. E3 is equal to entry subscript window, comma, and then we're going to bind it to the password string. Text var text var equals password. And we need to set our grid elements. L3 dot grid row equals 3. E3 dot grid row equals 3, comma, column equals 1 rather than 0. 0 would be the first, 1 is the second.
On E3 you had broad instead of green.
Yeah, Garad. And I've apparently misspelled string var. Capital V, capital V. See where it says string var there? Make that a capital V, and thank you for fixing my grod here. All right, there we go. Okay. All right. Now we didn't modify it to use the password, but we can. But what I wanted to show you is that changing the password when we want to is easier than having to delete and insert. So when we do the login, let's just change the password variable. Password dot set parentheses quote quote in parentheses. We're going to wipe it out, right? As soon as they've logged in, we don't get to see the password anymore. See that? It wiped it out. I didn't have to call delete and insert. I mean, and maybe that only seemed like one, step we've got to skip. But it's a useful one because not only do we have string vars, we have int vars, integer variables. We have float vars. We can bind actually they're called doubles. We can bind a numeric variable to an input box in the same fashion. And it's a real drag if you have to get that piece of data out as a string using .get, do some math to it, and then turn it back into a string so that you can then do delete and insert if instead you can bind it to a variable. That might be worth doing as well. How about we have a variable which is a login attempt counter? And that'll be the last thing in this particular display. So we're going to need a couple more labels, and we're going to need another variable, an integer variable. Attempts, attempts equals int var parentheses 0 in parentheses. We're going to initialize it to that. So let's create another label. L4 equals, let's see what happens if instead of setting this to a text like that, if we just assign this label to our integer variable. So L4 is equal to label, parentheses, window, comma, text var. I know it's not a text var. It surprised me that we did it this way. Text var equals attempts in parentheses. And let's add that to our grid. So we're going to do L4.grid row equals 4. L4.grid parentheses row equals 4 in parentheses. Now if that's not a syntax error, then we should see, yeah, right there. Our label says 0. That's the number of attempts we've made. Since it's not an input field, it can't be modified. That's why I made it a label. Everything else we wanted modifiable. Now really, right, we ought to have something that describes what that 0 is. So maybe we ought to do this. Maybe instead of binding the text var to L4, we will do attempts, right? L4 is equal to label, window, comma, attempts, and now let's make an L5, which actually contains, is bound to our attempts counter. L5 is equal to label, parentheses, window, comma, txt, text var equals attempts. And let's add it, but as column 1. So L5 dot grid parentheses row equals 4, column equals 1. What I done do wrong?
Do we, let's see, L4 equals label, parenthesis, window equals text, text equals attempts. That's the issue. Part of it. So, under attempts equals int var, the parenthesis 0. L4 equals label, window, comma, text equals attempts.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, see right there? Thank you. TEXT equals attempts. Right there. All right. And so now, nothing's changing it yet, but we can make a change. I don't know if changing it is as easy as doing what I'm about to try, which is to come up into our login function and do attempts plus equals 1. Wouldn't that be nice? Nah, didn't think so. But we can get the value out and add 1 to it, right? So x equals attempts.get parentheses, in parentheses, and then attempts.set parentheses x plus 1. Now I'll add a comment, increase the number of login attempts. Let's break that out into several steps. Why be too clever? X plus equals 1, and then attempts.set x. And we didn't use the password.get, so we may as well. So, quote, logging in, I'm changing this print line, logging in with password, end quote, comma, password.get, parentheses, end parentheses. Each time I press login, it's updating the number of attempts. So, I'm going to pause the recording uno momento. So here's what the homework assignment is going to be. Well, that's pretty lame. It's not what I was expecting at all. We're going to have one field that says gas and another field that says speed. And the gas is going to start off at 20 gallons and the speed is going to start off at 0. And then there's going to be 2 buttons. The gas pedal is one button, and then the brake is the other button. So this is going to be a label right there. I would make that a label as well. I would make that a label as well so that somebody can't just come in and type modify gas. And that's going to be a label as well, right there, 4 labels. You're going to want to create numeric variables, int vars, for that and that. Each time gas is clicked, speed increases by 10, and gas decreases by 1. We use a gallon of gas every time we accelerate. Each time brake is clicked, speed decreases by 10. Nothing else happens. Gas does not decrease. Make sure that gas, or that speed, cannot go below 0, right? If you brake too much, it's up to you to kind of figure out how you're going to handle it. If what happens when gas is 0. Are you just going to allow the gas to go into the negative, right? Or are we just going to stop it at 0? Or if you stop it at 0, is it going to allow it to accelerate or not? I want you to figure out what you're going to do there. So that's fairly similar in a way to our login, right? Where we had a button where each time you click the login, it goes ahead and triggers, goes ahead and increments that counter. But you're going to have two variables bound to two labels, not just one. So you can have an amount of gas, int var, or you could play with double var if you want to make it a floating point variable. And you're going to have another one for the current speed. And then you're going to have two buttons, one that calls in a function that accelerates and one that calls a function that decelerates. And if that doesn't make a whole super lot of sense based on this lecture, I hope it does. But I'm going to be revising, doing an additional lecture on user interfaces that I flipped on the other class, and so y'all can have a chance of watching that as well. Does that make sense, though? We see how the pieces we've got so far can be used to do that. This is not going to allow any data entry. It's just going to start off with a fixed form. We have a little bit of time left, not much. Well, let's play with changing the colors of things, because colors are always cool. Where we create our first name label, let's set the background color for it. So for L1 is equal to label, window, comma, text, etc. After the first name, comma, do BG, short for background, equals, quote, light blue, end quote. And so it colorized that. Maybe made it look prettier. How about we try to set the password field to like white writing on a black background, something like that. Or we could just do that to that first name entry, which was right here. Let's see if we can do that there. Since this is the first name entry, we just made that blue, so why don't we try this as well? BG equals, quote, light blue, end quote. Yeah, and there it is. Now I wouldn't necessarily do that. The way our brains interpret things after decades of using these user interfaces is that if something has a white background, it's something that can be changed. So that would not necessarily be a good idea. But we can. We could change the foreground color too. I would expect it's just FG equals. Right, so the background is equal to black, end quote, comma, foreground equals, quote, white, end quote. Yeah. With our 10 remaining minutes, should we add a checkbox to it? And I think we should. Checkbox you're going to want to bind to a Boolean variable, not an integer or a string. So we're going to have to create a Boolean variable. So way down here at the bottom, maybe we'll have some control that says secure, and it's going to be checked or unchecked. So secure equals Boolean, with a capital B, Boolean var, var with a capital V, parentheses in parentheses. And I guess if we wanted initialized when it came off, we'd pass in true. That's just my guess. I'm going to leave that alone for now. But we could set it. Secure.set parentheses false, capital F. And now let's create a checkbox button to bind to that variable. CB for checkbox. CBox is equal to check button. Oddly, it's not capital B when it seems like they capitalize everything else. Check button, that C was capitalized, parentheses, window, comma, text equals, why do we even have to set any text? Yeah, I guess we have to. Secure question. Wait, I did the same mistake I did a minute ago. Text equals, quote, secure, question mark, end quote, comma, and then the variable that we're binding to it, variable equals secure. And let's make this row number 5 in our interface. So cbox.grid row equals 5. Is it secure or not? Well, maybe we should have made it, column 1, because it looks kind of lame being crushed over there in the corner like that. And when login is pressed, we need to retrieve that value and do something with it. So way up here in our login thing, let's get the value out. Print secure, question mark, end quote, comma, secure.get, parentheses in parentheses. So if they set it, it's going to say true, and if they don't set it, it's going to say false. You can do radio buttons the same way, and you know what radio buttons are. They're the round ones, where they're mutually exclusive, or checkboxes. You can click as many of them as you want. I hope that's interesting. I wish we had time for another lecture over this. But this will get you in the right direction. One last thing that I did not show y'all is asking the user for data, like with a message box, except getting data through a message box, like asking a question. And I don't think I had that example cranked up yet. So you can do yes, no, like ask, okay, cancel, question, do you want to open this file? Now that's way too much trouble here. Simple dialogue, no, we're not going to do that. It's kind of cool that there's perhaps a way to create an easy file dialog chooser. I hadn't looked at that one. I've not seen the one I wanted to, but the ability to ask yes, no, retry, cancel kind of stuff is kind of cute, so maybe we'll throw that in there. Which one are we going to do? How about yes or no? So we're going to do a message box.yes, no. So in our login process, way down here, we're just going to ask the question. Result equals message box.ask, I forget, ask yes, no, or ask yes, no, parentheses. First one's going to be a question, and the second one's going to be the option. We'll change those to better names as soon as we get the idea of what they look like. Or they may blow up. Let me guess, it's because I did not do, dadgummit. From Tkinter, import message box. Everything else imports when you get asterisk. Why not message box? Dunno. All right, option. We could put a question here, right? Was the login successful? I don't know, right? And then we could print out the result. If they click yes, it's true. click no, it's going to be false. What about those like abort retry fails with 3 different options? That was a different one. Let's try that one out. Yes, no, cancel. We have 3 different options. Ask yes, no, cancel. Not cacknel. Cancel. Was login successful? Yes. Okay, true. Great. Was login successful? No. False. Login successful? Cancel. None. All right. I guess that's a third possible value. Just to add a comment. All right. With the last 1 minute, what I want to do is I want to go back to our first version here. You certainly don't have to write your car application as a class, but if you wanted to, I would encourage it. The only complication, right, is that you have to keep track of these self-pointers, and pass them around. I'd encourage you to do it, but on the other hand, y'all have got projects to do, so, I don't want you to spend like 2 days trying to write a class that's your car application when you could, just take the code that we've written and modify it a bit and be done with it. But again, I wanted you to eyeball the way that a class works. You define a class, you have the constructor, the init method, you pass data into the constructor if you need it. The variable members of the class, notice the instance variables are all defined as self dot followed by the variable name. When you want to call a function that's part of your class from somewhere else in the class, you do self dot, like self dot quit, we call it quit function. And self dot display, we call it the display function. And then when we wanted to create our object, all we had to do is to call the constructor and pass in some data. And in this particular case, then we had to call main loop in order to, to wait for it to continue executing. All right. Shall we be done?